Hello, and welcome to this overview of Marriage in Trouble or Estranged Marriage historical romances. I'm Olivia, your favorite resource for book recommendations you can easily screenshot, and you're watching Random Olive Reads. So, what exactly is a marriage in trouble? Well, when we start the book, both characters are already married to each other, and we get to find out what caused their estrangement or quarrel throughout the course of the book and how it gets resolved. Sometimes the two people are still living together and give the appearance of a typical society marriage. Other times, the couple is very obviously living separate lives and conducting extramarital affairs. Now, the story progression is very similar to a second chance romance, except it's a little bit more high stakes. And it's more common in historical romance since divorce is very difficult and uncommon. So you're pretty much stuck being married to the person. So, first up, we have A Counterfeit Betrothal by Mary Ballog, and this is book 2 of the Wait series. This one starts with a group of young people picnicking, and one of them decides she wants to see her estranged parents get together. So, she plots a betrothal with her friend, who is slightly rakish and totally unsuitable, so that her parents will be forced to spend time together, either to break up the engagement or to stay for the wedding planning. Now, most of this book has to do with the parents' relationship and very little of the fake engaged couple. So we get to see an older couple who have been apart for over a decade, only corresponding through letters and shared custody of their daughter. We find out that the cause of the engagement was due to him misbehaving once upon a time, and then we see if they can overcome it. This story is actually intensely emotional with a little bit of lighthearted fun with the younger couple mixed in. Impassioned by Darcy Burke is book 2 of the Phoenix Club series. Constantine and Sabrina have a polite arranged marriage where they mostly live separately because Sabrina is shy and socially anxious and she stays at their country home while Constantine takes care of business and House of Lords stuff in London. And they see each other maybe like twice a year. After 2 years of this strained marriage, Sabrina decides she wants children and demands it of Constantine. Both of these people are terrible at communicating with each other, so they each separately end up enlisting the help of younger brother Lucian and club manager Evie to help gain some skills in seduction. There's lots of potential for drama here as Sabrina meets Constantine in disguise for his lessons in seduction. A Tryst by the Sea by Grace Burrows is book 1 of the Siren's Retreat series. Now, these two have a very cold and formal relationship, so the Viscountess is planning to spend some time alone at the seaside before she confronts her husband and tells him that she wants to leave him. Now, the husband has been hesitating on making any sort of overtures for reconciliation for years, even though he's desperately in love with his wife, and decides that this year he wants to follow her and try to make up with her. They've both ended up at the seaside cottage where they had spent their honeymoon, and while there, they renew their affection for each other. Except they still need to actually talk about the reason why they've been so distant in the first place, and the reader gets to find out what all this coldness is about. The Devil's Submission by Nicola Davidson is book 2 of the Fallen series. We start with the couple being estranged and the wife not really knowing why. She had enjoyed the marital bed, but tries to tamp down her enthusiasm, thinking that she's supposed to be proper and docile and obedient. Meanwhile, her husband is hiding the fact that he's the submissive in the relationship and wants her to take charge in the bedroom, even though it's not quite proper. Neither of them talk about what it is that they really want, mostly because of propriety and all of that, but they've got to figure it out at some point if they're going to get back together. To Love a Scott by Jennifer Haymore is the prequel novella of the Highland Knights series. Now, this book is an updated version of the 2015 book, A Highlander's Heart. Claire and her husband Rob have been estranged for the past year after an argument following the death of their 1 week old son, something like that. When Claire is informed of his position in the battle against Napoleon, she decides to go to him before it's too late. They reunite on the battlefield after it's all over, glad for his survival, and slowly make progress towards reconciliation. However, they still have starkly contrasting communication styles and a very different approach to their emotions. And so there's a lot to overcome here. Additionally, this book sets up like the rest of the Scottish soldiers, and they kind of turn into a group of agents working for the Home Office, etc. So everyone gets their own romance. This one is basically just a novella length to set up the series. The Rake Hell of Roth by Amelie Howard is book 2 of the Regency Rogue series. Now, at the end of book 1, we see Isabel and Winter get married, basically saving her from the unwanted attentions of a villain, and we're thinking everything will be happily ever after for them. Except it's not. We are 3 years later, and Isabel has basically been left in the country by herself while her husband goes back to London to run his gaming hell and be a rake and have a scandalous reputation. And she decides to go and confront him to try to make a real marriage of the deal, but he's all afraid of feelings, so he pushes her away until he doesn't push her away, and he's slowly starting to learn to embrace those feelings. Keep No Secrets by Charlie Lane is book 3 of the London Secret series. So this is an older couple who have been married for a long time and have been childless after all those years. And then one day the wife discovers that she's pregnant and she thinks that her husband will be happy about it. But he actually thinks that she cheated on him and accuses her of that and then runs off to the country. There's a big, huge fight because he's basically an idiot, and he goes to work on his plants or landscape designs or who knows. He really does need to grovel pretty hard to get his wife back after such horrible accusations. The Day of the Duchess by Sarah MacLean is book 3 of the Scandal and Scoundrel series. We meet this couple at the start of book 1 of the series, where the Duke is visibly cheating on his wife at a garden party and sets off the events of that book. Now, this book is told in a non-chronological timeline showing how these two ended up married in the first place and the current status of their relationship. Now, at some point, Sarah has left her husband and left the country not to be found, and she has returned after 2 years to ask for a divorce. Malcolm, meanwhile, has been spending that time chasing after her and looking for her and is very hesitant to give in to her request. He finally does relent on the condition that she help him find a replacement wife. With the chapters from the previous timeline, we get to see how these two people meet, fall in love, and end up in an entrapped and loveless marriage. Even though Malcolm seemed villainous before we even started this book, we start to see a little bit of how things turned out the way they did. It's definitely a twisty, angsty story here that packs an emotional punch. Lessons from a Courtesan by Jenna Peterson is a standalone novel, but related to the Bellingham Bastard series. Justin, an earl with a secret about his brother, is being blackmailed into marrying Victoria by her father. He's not sure if she knows about the blackmail or not, so he basically leaves her alone at his country estate the day after the wedding and returns to his own life in town. Years later, unrelated to Justin at all, Victoria is looking for a friend who has gone missing or gone to London as a courtesan, so she dresses herself up as a courtesan to enter society. Of course, when her husband sees her, he recognizes her immediately and is mad about it. Now, she's just focused on finding her friend. He's in the way, and she doesn't even know why he left her in the first place. It's a huge mess, and eventually those family secrets Justin is holding onto are revealed and tie into book 3 of the Bellingham Bastard series. The Earl in My Bed by Stacey Reed is book 2 of the Rebellious Desires series. We have a cold and stony marriage here because the guy was blackmailed by her father into marrying her, even though she didn't have anything to do with it. Well, now she's fed up after all these years and wants a divorce. And just when the idiot Earl decides he wants to bed her and make an heir. There's lots of angst and grudge holding in this one. It has a very similar setup to the previous book I talked about, Lessons from a Courtesan, with the blackmailing father. It's just the outcome's a little bit different since she really wants that divorce. The Courtesan Duchess by Joanna Shoup is book 1 of the Wicked Deceptions series. This one starts with an arranged marriage where the groom is drunk and has no idea who he just married. He leaves her pretty much immediately and resumes his debaucherous lifestyle. Many years later, the Duchess wants to solidify her claim to the money and land of the estate and decides she needs to be pregnant with the Duke's heir to do so. So she comes up with a plan to seduce her own husband and get herself pregnant without him knowing who she is. Super interesting plot here with both people keeping secrets and basically being slightly shady, especially when he finds out that she's pregnant and doesn't believe that it's his because she looks nothing like the courtesan that he slept with. It's a whole big thing. Private Arrangements by Sherry Thomas is book 2 of the London Trilogy series. So this one is also told in non-chronological order. And so the Marchioness here has an arrangement with her husband, allowing her to dally with affairs. We learn how their marriage starts, becomes fractured, and how they might find their way back to each other. So, in the non chronological storytelling, it takes a while for us to uncover what happened 10 years ago and all of the intervening years since. When we start the story, Gigi has requested a divorce from Camden so that she can be free to marry another man. He comes back to town from abroad and demands that she give him an heir before he'll grant the divorce. Now, the wealthy Gigi was initially engaged to an impoverished duke, but that man drunkenly fell off a roof 2 weeks before the wedding and leaves her kind of high and dry. So while Gigi pragmatically plots to marry the next heir, she's shocked to find out that she's genuinely attracted to him when she meets him. He rejects her because of a prior understanding with a different young lady, even though they're not formally betrothed. So we get to learn all of the dirty, angsty history of how Gigi and Camden ended up married in the first place and how they both acted immaturely along the way. Now, in reading this book, I could tell something terribly manipulative was about to happen and not really looking forward to the fallout, but still, it happens exactly how you would expect. Meanwhile, in the background, Gigi's mother is trying to cultivate a backup plan for Gigi to meet a neighboring duke, but then she falls in love with him herself. And lastly, we have To Have and To Hoax by Martha Waters, which is book 1 of the Regency Vows series. Violet and James have been married for 5 years, and 4 of them have been spent in chilly silence from an argument that none of their friends know any of the details about. And now, suddenly, Violet is feigning consumption to get James's sympathy and attention, but he's onto her pretty quickly. This story is basically just a comedy of errors and miscommunication all the way around, and really fun to read to watch these two get back together. This book was also a nice setup of the friend group that surrounds both Violet and James and how their meddlesome friends get all their own romances in future books of the series. Thank you so much for watching this video. Links to all of these books are in the description box. Like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos, and you can follow me on Instagram at randomolive.